Take a big breath in. Here we go. I mean, are you, this is a funny question, but are you technically my boss?
Yeah. Yes, I
Yeah.
am your boss.
Yeah. You know
Yeah,
what?
it's a chain. It's like Barbara's really your boss, but then yeah,
Hmm.
in charge of all the people. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, gotcha. And what I love about that, it's funny because I was like just thinking about that before we got on here, and I was like, wait, would I call Eleanor as my boss? I get the thing that's like one of the things I love so and appreciate so much about Kripalu is like is working at a place where like I'm not even like I don't think of it in terms of like, oh, that's my boss, or like, ooh, that's the CEO, or ooh, that's
Yeah.
no, it doesn't ever feel that way. And yet you could still feel like it's not lunatics running the asylum.
Yes.
'Cause
Totally.
that'd be the total flip side about leadership, right? Because that's something I would love to get
Mm.
into here too, is, like, if we have leadership that has a very unclear, like, "Wait, who's in charge here?" Even if everybody's nice and kind, it could still feel, like, unmoored because nobody yeah, it gets hard to feel safe when you don't know who's holding it down in what capacity.
Yeah,
So,
totally.
yeah, so that's all to say something I love so much about Kripalu and working and being part of the team at Kripalu is every meeting, every faculty retreat, everything, it's just like always held. And there's like, there's a logic, and yet it never feels like, oh, this person's in charge, you know? So I don't know if you want to like jump off with that or like how it
Yeah.
looks.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think what you're speaking to is really astute in that absolutely like if if there's nobody actually running the ship or creating a container, things feel very unstable, very unsteady. Um Processes are unclear, right? Like, it's like I have a question, I have nowhere to go, or like I ask 3 people and none of them know, right? So a lot of what we've been working towards, especially in the R&R and like Kripalu programs department, is really creating a lot of stability in those systems for the faculty and the other departments that we work with. Um, and that's things everything from, like, how do you get scheduled to uh how do you submit your workshop ideas? How do you, get paid? How do you, start teaching different things at Kripalu, right? We've created really good systems around that, so that that foundation is really there for folks to lean into. And the more that there's a stability and a structure for folks to lean into, that creates a certain level of stability. And then, I love that you're talking about like, oh yeah, these meetings like have some form and it feels like you're there, but it never really feels like anybody's like necessarily like in charge, right? And I think that that actually speaks a lot to the Kripalu methodology itself. So when I think about running meetings, I'm actually not really thinking about running meetings. I'm thinking about running an experience more
Mm.
than running a meeting, right? So we might have an agenda and we might have some very tactical things to accomplish. And similarly to teaching a workshop, I might have learning outcomes. Like I want people to walk away with X, Y, and Z. Um, but really, the methodology itself is how do we gain the wisdom of the group here? And how do we make people feel like they're part of the group? How do we make sure that relationships are being built not only between the faculty themselves, but with the administrators that are running things? And really really creating an environment where we actually all are accountable and responsible to the thing that we're doing, right? We might have different positions inside of that, but all of us as a team are working towards the same goal. And to me, I think one of the things I've really learned about leadership in the last 6 years is that one of the primary goals of a leader is to empower the people that are in positional power below them, right? And so the more that I can empower my team to do what it is that they are brilliant at, the more growth opportunity they're going to have to move into something where they have feel like they have autonomy and authority and can just be who they are inside
Mm.
of that role.
That's amazing, and I'm really grateful too, like, it's not lost on me the time frame at which I arrived at Kripalu. because I'm sure like any organization or any place that's like been around has like ebbs and flows in different time periods and like, different leadership, different. And I feel like I came in right at the end of 2021. And I feel like I came into a really great situation. Again, I have nothing to compare it to because I wasn't at Kripalu before. I'd known of Kripalu, but I was so like tunnel vision in the entertainment industry. I'd heard of it. I knew people that would go. But, coming at that time, if I've always felt so, supported and expansive. It's just like, like, be encouraged to follow like you're saying, like, encouraging the people, I guess if saying quotes, like, below you, like, in these different roles, how do you empower them and encourage them? And I've always felt empowered and encouraged to follow my curiosity, put the work in, and then deliver something to say, "Here's what I'd like to offer the community here. What do you think?" And then to have the opportunities to dig into that and let it grow and expand. So I feel very grateful for that. And it's what happens in those. It's interesting you say how like the leadership is kind of a reflection of the Kripalu methodology, like how it all dovetails. Because, for instance, in our last faculty retreat, Jurian, our beloved Jurian, guided us, the faculty, in a yoga class, like in a session. And I have never felt so life-affirmingly challenged in a yoga class as I have with Jurian. Like, I've felt challenged in different yoga classes coming from different lineages where it just felt like a workout class, and, no shame in that, nothing wrong with that, but there's a difference in feeling like I'm invited to meet my edges, my growth edges, with this sense of, yeah, with a I don't know how to say it better, like a life affirming, because I'm coming, like, encouraged to come up against my growth edges in a way that's like I'm excited and I'm energetic, and it's like bring in the way that Jurian held that class, of course, a Kripalu, like legendary Kripalu teacher. And so the way that she did that within the class, it's also interesting how you're saying like holding the meetings in general, or like we have a learning agenda, like a thing that we want to achieve here ultimately, right? We want to achieve growth and transformation, but in a way that it's that, I don't know, I guess it's that like universal balance of like a push pull, like it's doing, not doing. And it's just like how you hit that or how you walk that line is such a fascinating thing in every aspect of life. But that the Kripalu methodology is not just about the yoga, it's about life in general. It's about how we even hold our meetings, you
Yeah,
know? And
absolutely.
that's so cool.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. Like launching off with that, first thing I want to ask related to that is like where Kripalu is at now. Like where, like how it is fitting into the world now versus maybe stuff that has come before in different phases.
Mhm.
Like with what's going on at Kripalu now, I know in these amazing faculty meetings and the retreats, we'll talk about different pillars of Kripalu and all those things. So anything, like, you don't have to like go through all the bits and pieces, but like what's most interesting to you right now or most exciting about what Kripalu is doing in the world now?
Yeah. Yeah, this is a great question, and really, we're at this point where, because I have been there for a long time, and I've seen a lot of change there over the last 18 years, and, there really was this point where, we were doing what we were doing in 2019, and 2019 was a really great year for us, and then 2020 hit, and the world stopped and we closed, and it was really a pivotal time, I think, not only for the world, but for, um, the things that we had begun to identify that needed to shift at Kripalu in 2019. And it was really a matter of, right, Kripalu yoga and the methodology, just like you say, is so much more than asana on the mat. It's so much more than poses, and really a core thing that we're up to is how do we use these tools in our everyday life? Like how do we get life affirmingly challenged in an asana class and then step off the mat and come into our lives where we're going to meet challenge. It's going to happen. And then we can use those same exact tools, stopping, breathing, noticing, allowing, feeling, all of that, um, to then meet those challenges in life. And so there was really this moment where Kripalu was being called into meeting the moment of the world in a different way. Um, the wellness industry has, its bright spots and its shadows, and I think that there really is a way that a lot of wellness work can be very navel-gazy and very self-centered, and not to say that work on oneself isn't important, because it is incredibly important, like, self-study and understanding my wounds and where I came from and all the subconscious shadow stuff that's running my life is incredibly important. But what's really vital is that it needs to be connected into why am I doing this? Like, I can do it for myself, but I'm really doing it for my family, and I'm really doing it for my community, and I'm really doing it for the wider world. And it's really about becoming that healthy cell in the organism of the world. And so I think, like, as we were moving through the pandemic, there was a bit of a blessing in being able to work with a really small team that was incredibly visionary at the time, to move us into uh, this real this real commitment to the societal transformation that we're up to, and personal transformation in service of societal transformation. And so I think that and we've made incredible progress in that in the last few years, towards that. And everything from how we what we program, to who we bring in as presenters, to how we're moving in the room, how we train our teachers, how we're in relationship with one another, has all really impacted that. And a lot of it is related to our regenerative community model, where the wellness world has a tendency to be a very white and very upper class kind of place. And we know that these tools are applicable to much more than that demographic, right? And so there's real meaningful push to not just ask the question of, like, how do we get more people of color? How do we get more queer people? How do we get younger people in here? Because that's not really the question. The question is about, how do we create a space of belonging where those people feel like they belong here? Because getting them here is one thing, but then having them feel like they're in a container that is supportive is a totally different thing. And so we really began to, at least on the programming end of things and the strategic end of things, really began thinking about, how do we make our relationships with presenters much more relational instead of transactional. And you're an artist and on the on the scene, right? And it's easy to kind of, like, you dip into a project and then you're out of a project and then you dip into this, and it's very, like, per diem drop in kind of contract work. And so we started to really think about different models of, how do we come into a deeper relationship with folks who can actually challenge us to evolve and become a better organization. And so we have a handful of partners like Susanna Barkataki and Jacoby Ballard and Hawa Kasa and Reggie Hubbard, who've been on this, like, visionary panel with us for many years, and really helping us kind of understand what we're doing better, from an outside perspective. But then they're also in a place where they're bringing their communities here to be in the Kripalu space. And then the regenerative community piece of it is that, whether it's through these visionaries and their work, or whether it's through our impact work, where we're bringing in nonprofit leaders for a transformational leadership retreat, or we're bringing in a cohort of mothers who have experienced gun violence in their children's lives, or veterans, or hurricane, that we brought in the Asheville folks that had kind of, like, rebuilding Asheville after the hurricane, and bringing in these cohorts of people to have a really restful experience, in a space where they can begin to kind of, like, they loosen themselves, right, from the grip of the world. And then they're able to be in a different space that allows for that creativity and those connections with other people, and really creating this network of folks um, that begins to broaden and expand who our community is. So there are people that may have never come to Kripalu before, but now we have them in these different cohorts, and then they're starting to dream up programs. They're starting to dream up ways to come to Kripalu. They're starting to talk to their communities. So there really is this beautiful like mix, and you can see that even too in our schools alumni as well, it's like they're coming in, they're doing different things, and, it's something that I think we see in the faculty too, like, really creating, it's easy in, like, a yoga studio model, again, to, like, dip in, dip out, and, like, maybe other teachers, but we're really making a concerted effort to, like, create that community for people to be a part of so that we're really talking about, like, how are we evolving this lineage? Like, what are we taking that really honors the roots of yoga, honors the roots of our lineage and where we've been, and then mix it with people who aren't from our lineage, that have a lot of really valuable things to say, and then evolve what it is that we're doing so that we're actually meeting the moment. We're actually meeting not only people where they're at in their own challenges, but we're actually meeting the world where it is. And so that's a lot of I feel like that's some of the, like, really great work that we've done, and it's something that, you know, Kripalu almost has a responsibility to be a leader in this field, and I think that this kind of work actually brings us into that place of being a leader, of bringing us into, like, the new world that is being formed, so
It's beautiful.
yeah.
Yeah, there's so many aspects to that, and I don't know if I'll articulate this quite the way I want to, as this thought is like eh, trying to be articulated in my head, but that I feel like a lot of times through different, you could say like the hot topic of the social zeitgeist at the moment. Sometimes you see, for instance, like various corporations, like pick out the hot topic of the moment and then try to represent that. But it's like just moving with the waves of what's on everybody's mind, what's on the news, what's on the whatever. And so agree or disagree, it just feels sometimes disingenuous,
Mhm.
right? And it's like it that's a complicated issue, which maybe is like a pin for another day. But the thing that I loved about so much about Kripalu coming in at the time I did was out, in the world, you see all these people fighting each other about social justice, what this means, what that means, and what DEI like on down, right? Getting into these things that are getting highly charged and some things that aren't even necessarily, sometimes not even necessarily inherently political that are getting politicized. Some things that are just like baseline human issues that you would think like, why wouldn't everyone? But once it gets politicized, it becomes like a hot button issue, whatever. And what I would see and what I would experience at Kripalu and what I hear from what you're saying is, oh, this is the real thing. Like, this is the actual work of doing this. Like, this is what inclusivity actually means, what it actually looks like, and how you create a healthier ecosystem by diversity. Like, if you're talking, like, even if you came down to like the biological mechanism of, for instance, like, a farmer trying to have healthier crops, well, they need like diversity of the microbiome of the soil. Like, just obvious things that have these overarching principles. And so when you're talking about, and that's why, like, I'm trying to say, and I'm trying to stick with it too, because especially on this podcast or generally, like, I don't like dig into like specifics around politics. So that's why I'm like using a lot of words right now to try to get to a core
Yeah,
point.
totally.
You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
But the idea of things that are foundationally human that actually make us a stronger, better, more cohesive species, not just, oh, what's the hot button issue of the day or what's going to like, make our brand look better or something that like sometimes you see in in the corporate realm. It's like what actually uplifts our species and what do we actually do to make it happen and to see that happen in real time. And from even the time I was in 2021 to now, like, actually watching this stuff every day I show up and it's like, "Oh, this program's going on, that program's going on, here's a new thing we're doing." It's I watch it happen every day in real time, and I'm just so grateful to be part of an organization that's actually like that, right? That, like, really puts our not to use such a cliche, but, like, puts our money where our mouth is kinda thing. and like just really puts our shoulder behind stuff that actually uplifts our species, you know?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's, that's been it's been a real I wouldn't what am I saying? The words like struggle or challenge come to mind, but it's really not that. It's really it takes time to come to an orientation in these things because we're just living in times where there's so much information coming at us, and some of it is true, and some people are intentionally lying to us, and then there's like the AI of it all, and then like everybody's got an opinion about all of it, right? So it's so much information coming at us, and so it's very difficult to bless the human brain for wanting to make one cohesive story out of all of the chaos that's happening. Like, I think there's really, like, an impetus to do that, and, the thing is that some things we'll just never know. We'll never know. We're not capable, and I think something that you're talking to is really, like, we spend so much time in this divisive place of, like, this is the right way to do it, this is the wrong way to do it, like, cancel culture was such a thing in 2021, and, I'm not saying that there shouldn't be accountability, right? Accountability is really important, but there's a way to come at it, and we talk about this, is, like, holding the in-between space, is really this it's a middle path that on the surface might seem very passive, right? So it's like, oh, it's like if I'm not standing on this side or that side of an issue, then, you know, right, because neutrality doesn't really help necessarily. Um, and silence doesn't necessarily help. But what we try to do is be in a place where we can have the conversation, because I think that that's what we're really missing, is actual spaces to have the conversations that really matter, where we might have very differing opinions on a thing, whether that's my relationship with with my partner, or whether it's, a political issue. But I think what you're saying is, like, Kripalu begins to create these spaces where, yeah, let's focus on what it means to be human and actually be in relationship with one another. It's very easy to hate someone that you're very distant from, right? The person on the other side of the keyboard on social media. It's very easy, you know. But to actually have the skill set to sit down and be in conversation is a completely different thing, and it takes a self-knowing, it takes a centeredness, it takes a trust, and it takes communication skills, and a lot of those things are things that are, you know, with the willing person, are very teachable skills, right? For us to actually create something together in community that moves us forward. I think there's one more thing I wanna say kind of in response to your last comment too, was like, you know, the culture change work that we've been up to at Kripalu in the last several years, is by no means perfect or clean or nice or like complete, right? There's something that we really recognized, as we began that work, was really like understanding our place in it, and the process is, we didn't create these problems. We're probably not going to solve these problems, but what we can do is own our place in it and do our best to make the change that we can. And that's often a very messy place. And it's a place where rupture happens, and it's a place where repair is possible. And I think if we kind of keep that in mind, that it's like it is the messy middle, and what makes it work is creating those spaces to know that things are gonna change and that repair is possible. Um,
Mm.
yeah, so I think, yeah.
No, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
I often think about how just like some again, like an overarching sort of bullet point and something that I felt in relation to everything you're saying was when I got there, especially around that time, around the end of 2021, much longer story for another day. Like I'll really put a pin in this one, but I was feeling very I was feeling very unmoored in my own life and sense of belonging. Again, it's much longer thing for some other time, but the main point was, I was like, okay, are you, do you live your values toward the person in front of you?
Mhm.
Right? Like take the big picture, bring it home. Like you mentioned, becoming a healthy cell in the organism of the world. I wrote that down. I love that so much. Right? So it's like there's this bigger picture and then there's you in your day-to-day life. Or like I've heard it said, if you want to save the world, start by cleaning your bedroom or something, right? Like this concept.
Mhm.
And whatever. I mean, you could pull so many things out of this, but the point being, I was like, um, I felt like I could agree with someone on something, but then I could see how this person would either, whether it's on the other side of a keyboard or whether it's like to an amorphous other, right? Them over there or whatever. And I'd be like, well, even if I agree with the concept behind your words, the way you're saying your words is actually aggressive and
Mm.
polarizing in a very unhelpful, objectively unhelpful way. Like there's no bridge here. There's no possibility for even there's no possibility to even invite a potentially uncomfortable discussion, but maybe we can move towards something in it. And then I came to Kripalu and I was like, this is what I'm talking about. Like these are people who, again, like I think I've heard you say before, there's the idea behind safe space for sure, and then there's also this idea behind brave space, where, like, you are safe to be brave or, like, to ask the question or to whatever, because when it all comes down to it, I actually learned this from, through kind of reading about relationship psychology years ago, but the long and short of it is just, like, if you're arguing with someone or if you're having a disagreement with someone, whether it's in a partnership and, like, a one-on-one or whether it's, like, in a community, the first thing can be helpful is to step back and say, "Wait, wait, wait. What is the goal here? Like, what's the goal?" And you may find that the person you're arguing with, maybe, not always, but maybe you might actually have the same exact goal. You just have a different idea about the best way to get there.
Yeah.
And what a beautiful thing to actually go back and forth and to exchange ideas about, hey, you know what? We do have the same goal. So even if we disagree about how to get there, maybe within our back and forth, we could find the most effective way to get there that's better than the sum of its parts.
Mhm.
You know?
Yeah.
And so when I came to Kripalu, I again, like, I appreciate you saying, like, it's not always perfect. It's not about getting everything right like you do like, as an organization, as individuals, we do the best we can and everything like that. But overarching value that I felt when I walked in there was like, "Oh, this is really a space for everyone to come in and to be heard, to try to connect more deeply." Bottom line. And where I would see people, like, living the value of, well, if I wanna see kindness in the world, let me try to embody it in myself. If I wanna see cooperation in the world, let me try to embody that myself. If I wanna see good listening in the world, let me embody that right? And then
Yeah.
deeply appreciate.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it speaks to that, like, level of integrity, right? This whole idea that, part of yoga is having your thoughts and your words and your deeds aligned, right? And that, when you're talking about like, oh yeah, you're saying the right thing, but the energy is not right. There's not alignment there, and there's like a lack of integrity there. Uh, and it can take some time to get to that as an individual, right? Like the space between who I want to be and who I am is sometimes very vast, right?
Sure. Yeah, totally. And I wanna reflect on one other thing before we transition into your personal work, which I'm very excited to dig into, like, in your, in your personal life and in your personal work.
Mhm.
Um Something I've talked about, like, on here, part of this podcast and the discussions, what has been so nice that it's blossoming out is having these continued conversations with people from Kripalu so that in the same way, like the work that we do on campus, so to speak, in the Berkshires, it trickles out when people go back home to New York or across the country or across the world. Like they become the healthy cell in the organism of the world. We like take Kripalu, right? We start to live it in the places back home where we go, and that these conversations get continued through this podcast. And then the other part about it is just expanding, always trying to expand the platform, in the sense that you had mentioned, the way that the wellness industry can be interesting. We could put it that way, like on a lot of different layers and a lot of different levels. And something that I find so fascinating about Kripalu is we have so many brilliant people who don't ride the waves of fads.
Mm.
Right? Like, that's something I love so much about Kripalu is when you get into the wellness world, a lot of people, even, whatever, power to them, I guess, Maybe not, but like a lot of people make a lot of money riding the waves of fads. And something I love so much about Kripalu is the methodology, um, the way that we approach whether it's the yoga practice itself and the asana or the meditation or Ayurveda, whatever it is. These are all things that have stood the test of time, and they're not I was gonna say they're not flashy, but the thing is when you get deep into the practice, it feels sparkly as hell, it feels like amazing, so it kind of feels special.
Absolutely.
You have to, like, commit to the practice, and it doesn't necessarily, like, pop off on social media because it's time tested and so that's something I love so much about Kripalu, and so just to say too, showing up at a wellness place that's, like, in tune with the world, that isn't trying to show off or create a stir by being like, "Well, I heard if you only eat red meat every day for the rest of your life, you're gonna be a superhero," and, like, people are like, "What the hell is this?" But it gets a lot of clicks. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
Kapow doesn't do that, like, and the individuals who work there, like, we are just people who try to live our practice as best we can and, like, just drop in and be there, and so, again, something I love very much about yeah, the culture.
Yeah, absolutely. And that speaks to the integrity piece too, right? Like there's the integrity of the individuals, but then there's the integrity of the organization too, and I think about it because I do a lot of work on the lineage side of things, right? It's like Kripalu is only going to succeed when Kripalu is what Kripalu is supposed to be, right? And that's the same for any of us. It's like our thriving is going to come from us being authentically who we are and not hiding that and not trying to like put it we got to put it in some kind of shiny package because we want people to come, but not saying not saying that the answer is out there and I
Mhm.
need to bring it in here because the answer is actually in here and I just need to be in tune enough with it, and the organization of Kripalu is needs to be in tune enough with it that we can stand in our power of like, this is what we know and this is what we offer, and it's gonna be for some people and it's not gonna be for other people, you know, and different pieces are gonna resonate with people at different parts in their lives too, but it really is that integrity piece, and, the Bhagavad Gita says, one's own dharma carried out imperfectly is better than the dharma of another carried out perfectly, right?
Mhm.
So it's really about leaning into that personal authenticity.
It's beautiful, and so much too of, like, guiding the program that I guide with Jess, another Kripalu legend, I know you guys are you've been there about the same time frame, right? So you guys have been there
Yeah,
together.
we arrived on the same day actually in
Oh, see.
2008. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, she's so steeped in it as well, and so I'm just it's an honor to guide with her and to be around her, and it's when I think of what I learned from her, it's like this felt experience of meeting yourself with compassion and love, which is just kind of like a baseline, like, okay, maybe I've heard that before, but, like, experiencing it in real time, you actually realize through practice and experience is the most radical transformation you will ever experience. And it doesn't come from pushing. It doesn't come from some fad new like trick that the internet just discovered. It actually is the radical experience of love and compassion towards oneself that then it changes everything as more effectively than anything I've ever experienced.
Yeah.
And like in the way that we do it, that Kripalu does it is palpable, and it's like it's real, and it's right there. So anyways, I find that very exciting, and
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. That's the work.
Yeah.
It's so shiny, right? Once we
Yeah, it
get in
is.
there.
It really
It
is.
is so shiny.
Yeah. And that there's a okay, truly, one other thing, and that there is a methodology, like you're saying, there is like a proven methodology to get there. It's not just words, it's not
Mhm.
just the concept. There's actually a proven methodology step by step to get there that we all get to learn and get trained in, and even the languaging we get trained in the faculty retreats and everything like that, like all that stuff, there's a proven methodology, which is just the best. So
Yeah, oh, absolutely, and you can feel it, right? Like I can feel when I'm in a Kripalu class because there is that underlying structure, and it's not super blatant all the time. It might be very subtle, but I can feel when I'm in a Kripalu trained class and when I'm not, and
right.
it's palpable. Mhm.
Right, it's not a paint by number. Somehow there's this, like, form structure that gives you, like, these it like keeps you in this channel. I don't know how to use the right words, but like it keeps you in a clear path, and yet it's not restrictive. It doesn't tell you how to teach. Like it has all the room for you to bring yourself to it as an individual. Really
Yeah. Yeah, and that's one of the beautiful things that I love working with faculty with is like, okay, here's the guardrails and here's the roadmap and here's the scaffold, but I want my faculty to bring the brilliance and I want them to bring the things that they're lit up about and that they're passionate about. Because that's going to create the most thriving and the most magic for not only the guest, but for the faculty themselves, right?
Mhm. Absolutely. It's
Mhm.
beautiful. So speaking of bringing yourself to the work, right? So you're such an important part of this institution, right? This, for lack of a better word, I don't even know if I like that word. You're such an integral part of this community, this Kripalu community. And of course, you bring yourself to your work and the work that you do. So I want to say before we even get into, I wanna say, like, whenever you know how, like, you get to know, especially through work that like this that we do, and, you get to know people in an energetic way, for lack of a better way to put it. Like, there's the essence of a person, and it's not even, like, woo-woo, it's, like, really anybody knows that feeling. You're like, "Oh, I know Tom as this name and this person, but then, like, I know Tom by how it feels to be around Tom." And when I think of you, I think I, like, feel this, um I know that the word animism is in your work. There's like a spirit animism, nature kind of feeling that actually just is, like, embodied in you. So it's like I don't quite have, like, the hopefully those words are getting, but, like, there's a feeling of being around you that's very lived in. It's not just a concept that remember with my mind, like, "Oh, Ellen Rose is into this and that." It's like it actually lives in you. So, but I'd love to hear you talk more just, like, into the work. Obviously, there's yoga and all these things, but, like, getting into the depths of the specific work that makes you you in your
Yeah.
process.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. Thank you for that. And thank you for that thank you for that reflection, right? The beauty of being in community is being seen by other people. So I really I really appreciate that, John. Um yeah, I think if it's all right, like I think talking about my work is best talked about like the journey that I've taken to get to the work that I'm in. If that's
Please, yeah.
okay. Um so so as I've mentioned, I've been at Kripalu for 18 years and really like the yoga work really was kind of my foray into all of this. And kind of yoga is lovely as a practice and like I think that there's a lot of my worldview that's uh really still understood through Sankalpa philosophy and or no, I'm sorry. I'm using the wrong word. I'm blanking on the word. Mm. Anyhow, we're gonna skip that piece. So, but there's a lot of the yoga work that's really foundational, and then I started studying Ayurveda, and Ayurveda actually made all of the yoga finally make sense. So there was a way in my practice that I was really felt like I was like kind of like, oh, I've got a little piece of it here, and that makes sense, and I've got a little piece of it here, and a little piece of it here, and again, the blessed human mind trying to make order out of chaos. It was kind of like, I'm not really sure how all of this fits together. I feel like I'm on a learning path. But then I started studying Ayurveda and then it all clicked into place as Ayurveda as a worldview um, that is really based on seasons and elements and qualities. And so there's very much a part of Ayurvedic philosophy and health and living that is really around the cycle of the day, the cycle of the year, the cycle of life, and things that are beneficial in certain times of day, times of the year, times of life. And all of that is elemental based, which has all of these qualities, right? It's like I'm cold, I put on a sweater. I'm hot, I take a swim, that kind of thing. Um, and so all of that really started to feel like magic. very quickly. Because, you talk to any person that practices earth-based spirituality or any kind of paganism, and a lot of them are working with elements. They're working with the Celtic wheel of the year. They're working with seasons. And then that all ties in really nicely both to Ayurveda and this kind of like the farm to table movement that we've grown up with, and really being in connection with the land. So all of those pieces started to come together, and there was a point at Kripalu that I started. It was a group of friends really that I knew through Kripalu, and we started having women's circles like monthly, like kind of like moon circles, and doing little rituals and whatnot around the Celtic wheel of the year, and just being in kind of like small group support with one another. So that's work that I've done for that I engaged in probably for 10 years. Um, and then point, there was a very specific point in 2018 where I really started to reckon um, with my ancestry and with my identity as a white person. And that was a really clear point for me where I'm like, I need to do better in this world. And the way that I found into that was through my ancestral work. And so I took this wonderful course um, through this group that's now called Comrades Education, called Before We Were White. And it was really went through this whole thing of like finding our ancestry before, um, as Eurocentric people, before we were kind of like, before white became a thing in the United States, because there was like a very specific point where it became that. And so going into my ancestry, I started asking these questions of how did my ancestors relate to the rhythms of the earth like before Christianity was really, really vital to me, because all peoples around the earth at some point were very involved, like they were very invested in the seasons. They were very invested in the light time and the dark time of the year and what that meant. And then working directly with the land, and the spirits of the land. So I started asking these questions, and it led me to my teachers who were actually based in Sweden. So I started, I went up the line of grandmothers in my ancestry, and they're all Swedish speaking Finnish people, Finnish women. And so I started being like Nordic magic and like Nordic shamanic work and Nordic paganism. And I found these teachers in southern Sweden, Jonathan Horowitz and Zara Valdebeck, who are part of the Scandinavian Center for Shamanic Studies, along with another woman named Annetta Host. And um, I initially became really interested in a Norse practice called Save. That is, it's both an oracular practice and it's a um, how do I say this? It's a bit of a power practice. So it can both be used to like send power to things that need power. So kind of like altering the course of a thing. And then it can also be used for divination. And so I studied a little bit with her, but then really started studying with Jonathan and Zara. And they have a bit of a background in core shamanism. So it's kind of funny to me that I went up this whole kind of ancestry path, and then ended up with teachers who studied with Michael Harner and the core shamanism thing, which has its own, that's a whole other bucket of worms that anybody that's listening can go down the Michael Harner path and understand why it's a bucket of worms, that we won't open here. But the thing about Jonathan and Zara is that their teaching is really about direct relationship with the spirits. And so um, regardless of history, the methodology of that work gets us into direct relationship with the spirits and spirit guides and spirit helpers, and also places and spirits of land and spirits of place, spirits of events, right? Like Kripalu itself has a spirit, the land has a spirit here, the stream has a spirit. And that brought me into a wider context of animism. And so animism being this concept that like everything, you know, you can think of animism as everything has a spirit, which is lovely, and my favorite quip about this is like, okay, it's easy to see the spirit in a tree or a lake or, you know, the bird. Um, but it's a little harder to be like, oh, this table that my computer is on actually also has a spirit, right? Like I'm actually in relationship to this table all the time, right? Even though it's not quote unquote natural. And so how I like to think of animism is really about relationships. So it's not so much that everything has a spirit, and it does. That's not untrue, but it's really about how am I tending the relationships with everything in my life. And so if I'm an artist, how is it that I'm tending the relationship with the poem that I'm writing? If I'm a mother, how am I tending the relationship with my child? How am I tending the relationship with the broader uh arc of the work that I'm doing, right? And whether it's at Kripalu or whether it's my personal work. Um and so that's really been a big piece is getting into those relationships and then beginning to tend them, which is no small no small piece of work.
If I
Yeah.
can for a sec,
Yeah.
there's two things. One is in the feeling of the animism in relationship to everything,
Mhm.
I could see that even being overwhelming.
Mhm.
All of a sudden, you have responsibility to care.
Yep.
Like, thinking about a pen, right? Thinking about like, I remember I went through, a phase in my 20s, it was more than a phase, there was, like, several years of just studying minimalism and, of course, how it overlapped with different lineages in, Eastern philosophy and, Zen and different things. And just reading about how, there was a person this was probably around the time, Marie Kondo, who did, like, the life-changing magic of tidying up, was, like, a big sensation, at some point, and she would talk. I think it was to credit to her, she was talking about how you, like, hang your after she uses one of her bags for the day, she'll empty out the bag, and then she'll hang it in its spot in the closet, right? So the bag has it reminds me of animism because she's like, or your shoes, don't just, like, throw them on the floor and they get all bent up and stuff like that. Like, put your shoes, like, in a place, right? And not only does it make your space look better, it's like you have a relationship to all these I say inanimate objects and so I could see how what was coming up for me as you were saying that, yeah, this sense of feeling like overwhelming to be responsible because I feel like it's so easy to treat never mind again quotes, never mind inanimate objects. It's like as a species, so many people have treated the natural world
Absolutely.
as disposable with no spirit to it. Again, however you might decide that you want to define that. But the point is, like, if you have a relationship to the natural world, you won't destroy resources in the name of very much quote unquote progress.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And again, there's all balance here, but whatever. There's so much to say about that, but there's just to bridge it to the other point and then get back um to the lineage here of like bringing you down the line to where you arrived at today, um, is braiding sweetgrass. Of course, Robin Wall Kimmerer braiding sweetgrass. She has this. I might have this totally wrong. It might have been like chapter 3 or something. It's been a little while, but she talks about the animacy of nature and how in her indigenous language. Again, I'm very much paraphrasing this, but it's a deep dive, right? If you want to, um, that she talks about how she was learning her indigenous language and I think she felt like she was getting something wrong because she was like, wait, I don't understand because she was saying, oh, like for instance, see that tree, go sit with them. And she was like, that no, that doesn't because in English we'd say go sit next to it or go sit by it. Like we call it it. But if you call it if you were refer to a tree as them, and again, you don't even have to go down the line of getting super deep with like if people are adverse to being like, there's no spirit in that tree. It's like whatever. If you you could think of it however you want to or not or whatever. But the point is, if you look at a tree and you say, go sit with them, and your entire language is set up and designed around sit with them, you're not just gonna go into a forest and start, like, carving stuff into the tree and decimating the forest, and, like, you're not gonna start ruining nature if you recognize the animacy of that nature, regardless of your belief system.
Yeah.
If you recognize the animacy of nature and that, like, the air we breathe, the water we drink, like, we are all one thing, and not to say such, again, overarching broad things, but animacy anyways, that's why that word and, like, that word and being in your work, I have so many feelings about it because it's so important to develop that sensitivity, even if at first it seems overwhelming. It's like, take your time with it, breathe.
Mhm.
Everything has spirit and relate. How are you relating, right? How are you relate? So anyways, that was my little yeah.
Absolutely, yeah, and that place of like, "Oh, wow," it's overwhelming because like, all of a sudden, I'm in relationship with all of these things, and I think it does speak to the disconnection that we have from our natural world and, and even from the people around us, right? Like, it's overwhelming to think that we have relationship with all of these things, and at the same time, we do, but there's this beauty in then, like, right, if this is true, then I actually need to have the agency to decide where I engage and where I don't engage. Because that's another big piece of the animism work is the reciprocity, right? So it's like I actually have a friend that I debate this with because, he does some spirit work as well. And it's like, well, do you really want to go like bothering that spirit or the like if you're not going to develop a relationship with it? If it's just like a one and done, like, hey, I'm trying to get some information from you, like, is that really ethical? Right. So it's like it makes one stop and think of like, oh wow, there's all these ways, and especially in kind of like the quote unquote magical community, right? There's all these ways where it can be just as extractive as, you know, dominant culture if we're just trying to get something out of it. But if we think about it of like, am I willing to open and tend to this relationship, whether it's a power place or, one of the tools of our magical work or a person, right? Because I think we see that even in like the online dating world, right? It's like, oh, I'll chat like five different people and then like they all like four of them disappear, right? Like there isn't the commitment to moving through and tending a relationship. But I think that there's actually a lot of personal power in saying, like, I'm going to choose to put my energy here, or I actually understand my own capacity and I can't put my energy there. Like, I can't, I might be in relationship to a thing, but it's actually best for me and, the thing, the person, the entity to just be like, I actually don't have the capacity to do that. And so it hones our own potency to be careful about those relationships.
Yeah, like where we put our energy.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, I'm thinking too about how being aware of when we are being an extractor. Right? And recognizing, is that really my intention? And, like, looking out and, like, am I just extracting here? And because it seems like you mentioned, like, dating app friends, just like a very, specific example. It's like, if the people who go in as extractors may or may not realize that's what they're doing, like, it could be coming from, childhood abuse patterns from
Totally.
parents or, like, who knows what, right? It could be, like, a
Mhm.
whole number of things. But typically, the extractor, sooner or later, if they're not already, ends up miserable. I might imagine, like, if and this is a very broad thing, but, like, the idea of karma, like, what you put into the world, you get back, and then using that as a launch pad about reciprocity on the other hand. And so how do we this is like a sort of a question, either to you or an open question. If so the first thing is being aware to not be an extractor, right? To just take without giving anything back or to like be, messaging people with no intention of like, just engaging in some capacity of like humanness, whatever, however you would consider that. But um, on the other end of that is how do you, as someone who wants to be in these exchanges of reciprocity, how you protect your energy from extractors?
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's a really interesting concept. So oh, I'm so glad you brought this up because I have opinions. So I think that there is something that I've learned from my teachers around personal power. And so when I'm using the word power, I just want to caveat that there's kind of like two types of power. And in the Scandinavian languages, there's very two specific words. There's makt, which is power over. So this is like that hierarchical power. Um, and then there's Kraft. And so Kraft is like kind of similar to what we think of as prana in the yogic tradition. So it's like it's the energy through the current, right? So when I'm talking about power, I'm talking about craft. I'm not talking about power over a person. And so it's incredibly important to safeguard our own personal power, um, because there's we have a well of it, and we know when it's we know when we're burnt out and we don't have it. One of the beautiful things about spirit work and the shamanic work that we do is that as we come into relationship with spirit guides and helpers, certain power places on the land, we can, as we come into relationship, we can actually ask these things, these entities for help, or these spirits for help. And so, in a way, I'm not just relying on my personal power. I'm relying on the power that I'm working with from the earth. And I think about my personal practice of kind of like being grounding into earth and grounding into sky at the same time, right? And being that intermediary. Um, and then there's a way that we can just continue to cultivate our personal power, um, so that we aren't losing it. And so that's kind of this idea of potency of like, how do I continue to be more potent in my life, right? This it and it gets into ideas of where am I using my energy? What am I saying yes to? What am I saying no to? How do I keep my word? How do I follow through on my word? How do I stay in integrity? A lot of the things that we've actually already talked about of like where my thought and my word and my deed are in alignment and I'm being really thoughtful about it. And so in the magical community, there's a lot of talk, and this is going to be hot topic for certain people. So
Yeah.
I'm just going to like note that, in the magical community, there is a lot of focus on kind of like boundaries and protection. And I don't want to say that boundaries and protection is not useful, but I do think that there's a bit of a trap with boundaries and protection. So there are kind of very basic protection spells out there. And I think that they're really useful for folks who haven't yet found this center of power, of personal power. Um, and it's a way to be like, I can think of myself being younger and kind of like interacting maybe with a spirit or something, like something was going on and I was just like, "Oh man, I cannot pay attention to you right now because I can't keep this shit together." Like, never mind, like, deal with whatever's going on for you. And so in a way, there has to be a boundary and there has to be a protection, right? Because my container isn't capable of being with it. Um and I'm talking about boundaries as kind of like energetic boundaries as you're talking about, but I think there's a point at which there's a trap of relying too much on the boundary. And so being like, okay, I'm putting up my boundaries, I'm putting up my protection, and like anything that's quote unquote evil is not going to get in. And then it starts to sound a whole lot like a wall, and it starts to sound a whole lot like a cage. And so And it starts to sound a whole lot like I know what's good for me and I know what's bad for me. And the thing that I've learned from my teachers is that the more I can live into my own power and the more I can cultivate my yes, my no, my own sense of empowerment, the better I am to actually walk in the world and whatever I meet, I can be conscious of meeting it and then say the yes or the no rather than relying. It's almost like outsourcing one's power to like a boundary or protection, right? Um, and so there's a way that like coming into that personal empowerment work is really about um there's this, Matt Kahn. I don't know if you have heard of Matt Kahn. So Matt Kahn, used to come to Kripalu, a while ago and kind of does, like, channeling and angel work and things like that, and I worked with him on the luminary side, and we went for a walk one day, and he was like, "Can I give you a short reading?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And he's like, "You've been walking through the world trying to figure out how you trust the world, but really the phrase I have for you is not who do you trust, but you do you trust." And that changed everything for me because it's true. I was walking through and being like, I don't know if I can trust the world and like, oh, I got to trust the world. And it just like felt like such a big, hard thing to do to place trust in something external. But what I really needed to do in a lot of the empowerment work I've done over the last several years has been like, oh, how do I get such a deep sense of trust in myself that no matter what the world does, because at least in my opinion, the world is not trustworthy. Um, how do I actually trust myself to meet whatever arises in my life? And for me, that's been the key of somebody might be extracting something from me, but my work has been to know myself enough and to attune to the field enough that I'm like, oh, you're trying to extract something from me, and that doesn't feel good. So, like, no thanks. You can go off and do something else, And yeah, so I think that's the long, very long answer to your question.
No, that's beautiful, and, like, the comprehensive aspect, because here's the thing, and why, like, a format even like this in conversation is, I think, such a beautiful gift is because that the way you just laid that out is, like, because we could say, like, baseline what the concept is,
Mhm,
but that doesn't mean it, like, clicks or gets embodied, right? Like,
mhm,
we can understand it in the mind as a concept, but it's through, like, getting like, kind of fleshing out the different pieces where it, like, can become embodied, can literally make sense, like, we could sense it, we could feel it. So that really resonates, and again, it reminds me of like, it's an echo of that, meeting ourselves with love and compassion, in the sense that when we get to know ourselves better in that way, like if you really have love and compassion for yourself, you'll recognize when you're being extracted from, and you'll be like, and you don't even have to be angry about it. You don't have to put up a wall that turns into a cage, like you said so well. You would just recognize the feel and say, "Oh, that doesn't work for me. I don't accept that."
yeah,
Right? And it doesn't have to be aggressive. It doesn't have to be so F this and like whatever. It's just,
totally.
well, yeah, I don't accept that extraction. I'm gonna step away. Like hopefully you're in a situation where you can step away, like literally step away.
Yeah.
And all the so with all that in mind that way. So it's very helpful the way that you laid it out. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, with the whole caveat of, like, so many people are in so many different places, right? And we're doing the best we can, and, like and there is beauty in, this meeting myself again with love and compassion over and over and over again, and, like, it is such a process of, like right, I can cognitively think it, and maybe I'll do it once really well, but then, like sometimes we gotta bang our heads against the wall, like, over and over and over again with the things that don't work for us before we're able to, like, really move forward. So I just wanna, like, kind of also caveat that where it's, like, a little bit easier said than done, and, life just continues to present opportunities for us to keep looking at ourselves and keep seeing our patterns, like,
Yeah.
you know? So often, it's just like, "Oh, look at me doing that thing again. Isn't that
Yeah.
cute?" You know? And sometimes I even choose to do it again, right? I can see myself doing it, and then I'm like, "Oh, I guess I'll do it one more time and see if it still works," you know? Um, yeah,
Totally. It makes
yeah.
me think of the as a parallel to the breath very much. Um, when when we start to really get the breath moving in the way that I guide these journeys that and it starts to really, like, raise the prana, you could say the life force, our personal power. That can be a scary feeling to feel the fullness of our own power, and sometimes, as a way of just conceptually bullet pointing, the way I think of it is, as our personal power starts to grow, it could start to bump up against these walls, these barriers, because a way that I think of it is, something maybe happens, an interaction, whatever, and so our we build armor consciously or unconsciously. And that thing that maybe initially protected us, once it's outlasted its usefulness, it can become a barrier. Right?
Absolutely.
So just like you were saying again about the walls and the cage and everything, like maybe it did keep some people out at a very necessary time, and thank goodness it did that. But at a certain point, yeah, at a certain point, it might become a barrier. And so when we start to feel our personal power growing in whatever form, right, of these different modalities, we start to feel our personal power growing. Sometimes I see it as like, the breath like will bump into these walls, and then the question becomes, do I need this wall anymore? Do I actually need this anymore, or is my personal power going to speak for itself? Like, to all the point you're making.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's absolutely beautiful.
One other thing I wanna say, before I get into the last, bit here with you is, I also love how you reference going to your lineage, right? Because there's so many conversations that are very important conversations to be had around, I wanna honor this, where is the line of cultural appropriation? Where is that? Where is that? And I think, like, an overarching principle is you, do you. Right? Like, find you, find the depths of you, research your family, your lineage, like, be you, Like, and that's a tricky thing to be if we don't know who we are,
Yeah,
like, a lot of levels, right?
absolutely.
But
Absolutely. Yeah. And
to the and not everybody knows their lineage too, so I wanna acknowledge that very much so. I
yeah.
mean, like, I'm talking more than just, like, an ancestry kit or something, like, I'm talking, like, the deeper layers, so a lot of people but anyways, just honoring I've learned that very much from you and also from Micah, you mentioned the Celtic, like, these different lineages that you can get into, um, and there's just endless things to explore, so it could just be a beautiful exploration of your own, lineage and getting digging to roots.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And there's I'm not 100% sure where this comes from, but I've heard both Robert and Beth Grace, some of our colleagues at Kripalu, talk about, there's a milk line and a bloodline. And so the bloodline is like the ancestry of our blood and of our people and lived experiences of our people, whether that's good, the good idealized version of that, and and then all of the things that our ancestors have done that have not been so great. There's kind of that bloodline with that we can draw inspiration from, but then there's also the milk lines that we can draw inspiration from, and that's really like, and in the example of mine, like, right, like my my bloodline is kind of like these Nordic practices, and even beyond my shamanic work, I've started getting into heathenry practices, which are kind of like a um, pre-Christian Nordic practices, working with Norse gods and traditions. And so that's kind of like my blood lineage, but then the yoga and Ayurveda is very much my milk lineage, right? So this is like where I gain a lot of nourishment, but like my people are not South Asian. But I've been in this community, in this lineage, so there's both of these things. And I think it's important to remember that it's important to remember the integrity of it, right? When we're talking about cultural appropriation, it can be so much like, I bought some mullahs and now I'm a Buddhist, that kind of thing. But like really studying with the people and really being steeped in it in a way that understands it beyond a consumer level is incredibly important. And at the end of the day, I want to make sure that folks know too that like a lot of these wisdoms are accessible to many types of people, right? And I think about this with my heathen community that I'm a part of, and one of the founders was just like, well, but you don't have to be Nordic, you don't have to be from Scandinavian countries or Northern Europe to actually practice heathenry. It's available to everyone, you know. It's just a matter of like, are you practicing it, and are you in integrity with it, and are you in community with it? And I think the community piece is also really important. We get into issues of cultural appropriation really when it's kind of like we're in our own little bubble, picking and choosing what works, as opposed to being in relationship not only directly with the practice, but with other people who are practicing and might be of that lineage. So.
Totally. Thank you for saying that and speaking so well to it. And it made me think of one way I might sum it up for myself is I grew up skateboarding
Yeah.
and we just call it don't be a poser.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
Yeah.
dedicate yourself to something. Like dig in, show up for it. And well, like you didn't have to be the best skateboarder at the skate park, but you just people could feel if your heart was in it or not. You know?
Yeah.
Um, great. So, last bits I had notes on. I mean, we touched on a lot of this stuff. I mean, are there any other pieces while we're here, like anything else you'd like to share in the work that you're doing or speaking to the world mission, like any
Mm.
pieces you'd like to share?
Yeah, we did really, like, touch on a lot of the things. I think, the only other thing that's, like, really coming up for me recently that speaks back into this community thing is, I've been thinking a lot recently, and this might be, like, a little bit left field, but just in terms of kind of, like, where the world is at this point and, like, our desire to wanna kind of, like, make one big cohesive story out of it, um, is that I've been thinking a lot about this, the bumper sticker of, like, think globally and act locally, and, I think it's just important. I think it's, like, worthwhile to just, like, put another little pin in that, right? Where it's, like, humans aren't necessarily like, we work on village level, we work on family level, we're, like, biologically wired to only work on village level. Yet in our modern world, we know what's happening halfway across the world at any given time. And we've got 15 different opinions about it coming through us every day. And while I think it's like really important to be able to understand the things that we are connected to in society and the way that our lives actually feed the broader global zeitgeist and the enabling of that, it's important to understand. And then at the end of the day, it is really like how I navigate is 100% reliant on how I guard my own mental space. And so it comes very, very personally of like, how do I guard my precious mental space and still be a responsible person to my family, to my community, to the world? Um, and then really focusing our work and our impact. I think so many people right now, and I know I've gone through this recently, it's just like, oh my gosh, how can I help? How can I change? How can I do something in this world? And it really is on that family level. And at Kripalu, we talk about Swami Kripalu's teachings about the Satana Dharma, where it's like the whole world is one family, and it really all begins in character building, and it begins in how I interact with my family and how I am with my community. And so, whether that community is my community here at Kripalu and what we're creating here with the faculty team and the other staff at Kripalu, or just my immediate community, like, these are the things that I really think are gonna get us through, is this relationship with what is really right around us, and if enough of us are having those good and right relationships with ourselves and the people right around us, that's really what's gonna move the needle in making this world a much more kind and human place, so.
Gorgeous. Yeah. Yeah. Just beautifully said. I like that. Yeah. Think globally, act locally. I often joke that I first heard that because of recycling in like fourth grade. Probably the best thing I learned in school, just hands down.
Mhm.
Like, cause what is more, beautiful. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for that. And, so related to, I'll just say these here just in case you want to. I had written down empowerment work, animism, spiritual community, intersection, personal growth and leadership, ancestry work, multicultural political allyship.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
I think we hit all that.
I know we did, and I didn't even that's the beautiful thing is I'll, like, write notes and stuff, but I'm like, let's just talk and see, and
Yeah.
it's kinda like that all, yeah, so and then you've got your website, ellen-rose.com.
Yep.
Yeah, anything else you want to share about, like, how people can find you, reach out to you?
No, the website's really the best place. I'm a little bit of a hermit on socials right now because 'cause I'm protecting my precious mental space.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, this is awesome.
Thank you, John.
Victory to the light within.